Everyone. My name is Sarah Call, and I'm with the Travel and Tourism Research Association. TTRA unites the best and brightest in the travel and tourism industry, and we are so excited to have everyone here with us today. Today, we are welcoming Laura Spiker, Senior Solutions Engineer at Tourism Economics, who will be showing us how vague metrics are out and tangible results are in. Before handing this off to Laura, I did want to mention that TTRA's annual conference this year is in Galway, Ireland, June 24th through 26th. If you are planning to join us but have not registered yet, I wanted to let you know that early bird rates end on Monday, March 31st. So please be sure to register soon in order to get those discounted prices. Now I'll pass this off to Laura.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, as mentioned, I'm Laura Spiker. I'm Senior Solutions Engineer specifically for attribution. So what I do is I'm really like the point person when you are working with us for attribution in terms of making sure that everything is tracking and set up properly and helping derive those insights. So I've been with TE for about 6 months. Previously, I was at Azira, aka Near, aka Uber Media. I had a lot of email addresses. I was there for 13 years. I started out as a campaign manager, so I've executed media and then provided attribution for that media. I also ran the advertising operations team for a number of years while I was there, where a whole team was responsible for executing digital media campaigns and providing attribution and analytics. Then I shifted to kind of like a partner success role, which was really around education and engagement and account management. So meeting with teams to help them with optimizations, tactics, strategies, and again, kind of deriving those insights from their attribution report. So super excited to lead this discussion today. So let's just talk about what the agenda is for today when we're talking about data and attribution. So first, I really kind of want to set up why we built this product and talk a little bit about what the challenges that we're trying to address. Then I'm going to get into the methodology and really the how and how it's done. And then I will try and spend the majority of my time really digging into the data. And then we'll follow up with just some questions that I think are good to ask when you're reviewing this type of data. And certainly feel free to ask questions along the way. I'm going to try and keep my eye on that when I'm going through the slides, but then I'll make sure as I shift through like demos and other things, I'll try and pay attention to the questions so I'm not missing them along the way. Okay, so let's get started with talking about the challenges. So the reason these products were really built was out of an identification of some struggles that DMOs were having. So the first just being around this issue of maintaining and growing funding and this belief, that marketing isn't necessary. People are going to come to your destination without marketing. They go to sleep and they have a dream about vacation and they wake up and book it. We all know that that's not true and that marketing is necessary. There's also this growing belief over the last few years, that the dollars could be spent elsewhere, whether that be on workforce housing or resolving homelessness. So that's been a challenge. And that's kind of led us to, the other challenges with elected officials and those changing at all times. So you get a new elected official, go through the process of educating them on what a DMO is, what you do, and the value that you're bringing to the community, really trying to ultimately create a champion out of them. And then ultimately they change again, you kind of have to start over. So that's another challenge. And then a lot of the KPIs, they're not familiar with it. And so there's a lot of education that has to be done. And that's led to an increase in accountability. Everybody's wanting more accountability, more transparency. And I think everybody's on board with that. It's kind of just, how do we do that? That's a challenge. It's not easy to track. We're not, it's not a brick and mortar store. We can't just do conversions and see the SKU code and see that something has been tracked through. And certainly we have impressions and clicks, which is something, but that doesn't really tell us whether or not people are showing up in our market. So that's another challenge. So that's really what we're trying to address here today with this platform. So you may already be familiar with TE and Oxford economics, but tourism economics has been around for 19 years. And then Oxford Economics, our parent company, has been around for 40 years. So we now have over 850 people on staff, with 400 of those people being economists. So we do like to call that out because we think that's a real differentiator in the space. Just having so many economists, that just brings credibility to the work that we're doing in that space. But economics is core to who we are. It's in our name, and it's why we've run or won most accurate forecast for the last 5 years, including this last year, beating out names like Citigroup, JP Morgan, names that you're probably familiar with. We all hear on the financial news. So again, just kind of speaks to the credibility and the trust that people have. We've certainly worked with a lot of people in the DMO space and in lodging verticals like Marriott and Airbnb, also in the tech vertical, working with Alphabet and Google. Last year, we did the economic impact analysis for Live Nation on the Beyonce tour. So, when Live Nation and Beyonce are trusting us to do that work, the same expertise that's going into that work is certainly what you can expect from us when you're partnering with us on the work that we're doing today. So now let's talk about the methodology, my favorite part. Okay, so at the simplest, we are linking together location data to the media and website exposures from the campaigns that you're running. That is then leading to visitation into your market. And then ultimately, that's what is delivering the spending, taxes, and jobs for your community. So, but let's go a little bit deeper. So we're looking at what the visit rate is of people that saw your ad or visited your website, but also looking at what is the visit rate of those who didn't see your ad or didn't visit your website. So in other words, creating a control group that looks similar but didn't get exposed to your media or website. What was their visit rate? And all of that is used to create the influence visit rate. And ultimately, the economic impact is built on that influenced visit rate. So just taking another example, let's say your community, 10 people came to your destination. Maybe 6 of them saw the ad and visited, but only 3 of those were truly influenced. In other words, they wouldn't have come if it wasn't for the media efforts that you did to drive them to your destination. So let's dig in a little bit more even about the solution and the methodology. So I talked about location data and how it starts with that. And you may already be really familiar with location data, but what we're collecting is the latitude and longitude that's passed from the GPS of the device. So same GPS that we all use to get directions, that's the level of granularity that we're collecting. And because of the robustness of that data, that's what allows us to see how a device or person moves throughout the world. So what restaurants they go to, what's their origin market, what recreational activities they might participate in, and all of that data can be used for research. Now, when it comes to connecting it back to the media or to the website, that's done via a pixel. So the pixel's placed alongside the media or it's placed on your website, either way. The pixel collects the IP address. And when that IP is a household IP, then we can look at what devices are also associated with that household IP. And that's how that bridge or link is done. It does become important to filter out public IP. So let's imagine I'm at the airport. I see one of your guys' ads. In this case, we're going to throw that out because we don't want to match it to every single person that was at the airport. It was only me who was actually saw your ad. So for accuracy purposes, that gets filtered out. It does work cross-device. I like to bring this up because with mobile location data, people are like, okay, does that mean they only can see an ad on their phone or they have to visit their website, my website from their phone? No, it could be from a phone, could be from a laptop, it could be an audio ad, like a Pandora ad that you listen to, could be CTV. In all cases, the pixel can be placed and captures that IP, and then that IP is bridged to the mobile device. And so then we can see, great, does that phone ultimately show up in market, yes or no? So now we're going to get into the data. So we're basically taking all of that data and running it through an economic impact model. So here's this, and I'm going to go through some static examples first, and then I'll get into a live demo. And first, we're going to go through the economic impact, but I'm also going to go through some other data metrics that we have. So for the economic impact summary, so up here is exposure date. So think that's the time in which, this is a media example. So that's the time in which someone saw an ad. So they saw the ad between August and November, and then could have visited August through February. So you might be like, okay, but why is this through November? In this example, I'm just also wanting to account for the attribution window. So you think there's a certain amount of time someone sees an ad, they're not necessarily going to show up that following week, right? They need some period of time. In this particular example, we're using an attribution window of 90 days. So just to have full results, in this example, we're pulling it through November because that allows December, January, February for them to visit and get attributed to that economic impact. So this is the total impressions that were served. And this is that influence visit number. So again, this is not just everyone who saw an ad and showed up. We're building a custom control group specific for that particular destination. And we are modeling that out to get to the influence visit rate. So it's just a more defendable number and helps when, someone says, well, yeah, you showed them an ad, they were already planning a trip anyways. It helps with that somebody saying that. What would you say back? So this is the visitor spending that's associated and the total business sales that are associated. And then we break that out by all the various types of visitor spending by category. You can see the local bed and sales taxes here. So, and again, as I mentioned, this is custom built for each DML. And it's also custom built for media and website. So even the control group is going to be different for media as it is from website, because the people that visit your website are different than the people that might see your ads. Okay. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I didn't know it was going to give me all of these cool animations. Okay, now we have a detailed version. So same data, just breaking it out a little bit further for media. So then we can kind of understand, okay, how do we perform at a campaign level? What's the impact by media type and by vendor? Again, this is all based on the pixels that we're running on the media. And all of this is something that we would collaborate together on in terms of naming methodology. And so this would, mirror however you wanted it to be visualized, essentially in terms of the labeling. Then we also show impact by DMA. So you can sort of understand which markets actually had the best impact in terms of the economic impact associated with that. And we're essentially trying to equalize based on impressions. So like, for example, here, New York maybe had the most impressions and maybe even had the most overall visits, but relative, if you look at the efficiency rate, the impact wasn't as high as it was for Washington, D.C. in this particular example. So it kind of allows you to compare different markets that have different impression volumes. Okay, then I wanted to get into more of the specific data with attribution. So this is an example of website attribution and looking at performance by page on your website. So with our website attribution, you'll be able to look at the performance by page, and there's sort of 3 metrics here, and I think they're all important and all ones to look at. So first is just impressions, meaning these are the pages that have the most visits to your website. So, and like this slash being like the home page. So this, in this case, the fall page had a lot of impressions, and then it goes down from there. Here is going to be the total number of visits. So this means somebody came to this page and then visited your market. But then here again, when I get back to that efficiency rate, this is going to be visits per 1,000 impressions. So again, this just allows us to understand what is that visit rate, so that we're not just simply saying, well, this had the highest visits, so therefore it performed the best. Because there might have been a page that ultimately had a higher visit rate or a higher conversion rate. So in this example, you can see I've filtered and changed it so that you can actually look at the performance by page looking at visit rate. And you can see it very much changes. And a lot of times, fall, still sort of hitting in the top 10, but not first anymore. Now we start seeing other different pages. And this is the type of data that can be helpful for a lot of different reasons. Just depending on what the data shows, it could inform your content strategy. So depending on what pages are showing up, it's also like, okay, is this something that we should promote if we haven't promoted it? Or it could be, well, that makes sense that this page is really high because this is for some special event that everybody loves to go to. But still, okay, we get a crazy high visit rate. People are coming to our website and our page as a source of truth to get the information about this event. So we should still pay attention to that and look at the page, make sure, do we have all the relevant information on there? I had an example where it was their turkey trot, like a 5K run on Thanksgiving, and it was the highest for the visit rate. So to me, I was like, okay, let's just check that page, especially when we're promoting, when we have other events similar. Does it have the parking? Can people sign up for the event on the page? Do we want to post, nearby breakfast spots, that type of thing? So even when something does really well, there could be an opportunity to just lean into that. And just making sure that it has all the information that you want. Same goes for the reverse, because we'd also want to look at what pages have the lowest visit rate. And is it because, like, okay, no one goes to those pages? Do we need those pages? Can we improve the content on those pages? So I think there's a lot that can be told here, and I'll give some more examples as we sort of go through. The other thing that we can look at is performance based, and I'm still looking at website in this case, in this example, is looking at performance based on source, medium, and campaign. So that is the UTM codes that get appended to the URLs. So let's say you're running, somebody goes to your website and they just go to visit XYZ / things to do. They're gonna, in this case, get grouped under organic because they kind of just like searched for you and went directly to that page. But now let's say you have a Facebook post, and whether it's paid or not, you're still potentially driving people to that page. You can apply UTM. Maybe you already know about UTM codes, but I know there's a lot of folks that I've chatted with that are trying to get used to using them more. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this. You can layer in UTM codes to the end of that URL, and then all of that gets captured here. It also gets captured in Google Analytics. So then you can say, oh, okay, this was actually from a Facebook post. And then you can label whether or not it's paid social or not. If it's search, if it's Google search, that can be something that's labeled. Certainly any vendor that you're working with, from a media perspective, you would want to make sure that you're utilizing those UTM codes in the URLs. I can tell you, as a former campaign manager, if you sent me an insertion order for a campaign and you sent me the creatives, I'm going to ask you for the landing page URL. And if you give me the URL of visit, xyz.com, that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to add UTM codes on my own. And also, I'm probably not even going to ask you, like, hey, did you want to add UTM codes? So it is something that I think some vendors they just kind of do it by default, but not all of them will. And if you want to be consistent in your naming convention, then that's really something you want to own. Because I've seen in a lot of scenarios, I'll see, like, for example, I'll see Facebook, but then I'll see another one that says FB, and then I'll see another one that says Meta, and another one that says Facebook.com. And it's kind of like, okay, everybody is calling this something different. And so it's all getting broken out that way. And again, like I said, that's not just website attribution. You would potentially have that issue with Google Analytics as well. And also, if you don't do it, it gets grouped under organic. It's really not organic. So I also get the question, like, okay, but if it's organic social, not paid social, should I just go, I don't need to use UTM codes? And I would argue that that's not the case. You still would, because you're still driving people to your website. It was your content that got them to come to the website. It wasn't organic. Like, organic really should be, the people Googling it, or they have the link pinned in their browser or whatever. So if it's content that you're driving, or it's content that you're promoting that drives to this website, then I say use UTM codes. So this is just another thing I wanted to show you, not only because I wanted to get on my soapbox about UTM codes, but also because you can then filter to sort of see which different tactics are performing better in terms of driving visitation and looking at that visitation rate, which I think can be really valuable when you're making decisions on future marketing efforts. Like I thought it was interesting, even just in this one, seeing like Bing versus Google. And in this case, Bing actually did well. I don't know why I'm surprised, but just saying like before I was always thinking like put Bing versus Google, and maybe you decide like there's no point in using Bing. But in this example, it would suggest like, no, you should keep using Bing because it actually has a higher visit rate than Google does. Okay, another example of data that I wanted to get into, which is looking at the DMA or the markets of who's seeing the ads, and in this case, I think now I'm looking at a media example, but this exists for both, whether we're looking at media or website. So this is saying, okay, these are the people that, they live in New York, they saw an ad, they visited, and then what is their visit rate? And up here, I'm just pointing out, I'm just filtering for the top 50 DMAs in this case based on impressions. So again, I always want to filter for top impressions because this is essentially what my media plan is showing. And then I want to do the same thing for total visits and visit rate, because then I'm curious, does this match? Does where I'm spending the money still get me the same results? Because this is what's going to help me figure out if there's opportunity markets. So perhaps there's a market that I'm really not spending that much in, but I'm getting a pretty good rate. So is there an opportunity for us to spend a little bit more in Detroit? And alternatively, not that we would turn off, a higher market, but probably I would assume, but we might want to tighten it up. Like, could we tighten the frequency cap? Could we tighten the audience targeting? Again, I'm going to just speak on my campaign management experience. I had a campaign that I was running. It was a regional campaign. And there were several DMAs in like Colorado, Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, a couple of others. And so as a campaign manager, I'm just putting that into the platform, right? I'm putting in my audiences, the budget, and I'm putting all the markets that they want me to run. Well, guess where most of the impressions ran? 50% of the impressions ran in Texas. That's just because Dallas and Houston are gigantic markets. And so, they just kind of sucked up all the impressions. So that wasn't ideal, nor was it what the client wanted, but I'm just saying like that is what will happen automatically from a campaign management perspective. And so that's something where it's saying you could go back and say like, hey, we want to be in these markets, but maybe not at this exact impression level. So opportunities would be to like maybe break them up into different buckets in terms of tiers and budgets. I know like I was saying, as a campaign manager, it was a pain for me to change that. I had to create separate line items for just Texas and put less budget on it. So that way that didn't happen. But otherwise, I think that's pretty common because the platform itself will just optimize to where the people are, and the people are in the gigantic cities. And like I said, maybe Texas isn't actually where you want to spend 50% of your budget. Okay, I'm going to quickly, I guess, talk about these last slides. Then I want to get into the demo, and I will, like I said, try and pay attention if you guys have questions. I don't think I see anything yet. Okay. Yeah, these were just questions that you can ask to level up your insights. And again, it's like, so just saying you can look at, are there opportunity markets that we can shift budget? So is there a market that's performing well, but doesn't have as many impressions? So looking at that visit rate association, I think is really powerful and can help you sort of, like I said, it's a way to compare different markets that are getting different budget allocations. So I think looking at what the opportunity markets are is like a number one insight that you can get. Also, like I was just, oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Also looking if there was markets that we can tighten up. So that's in my other example where you could have markets that you're spending a lot. Doesn't mean that you want to turn them off completely, but could we tighten up the frequency cap, for example? So frequency cap maybe is set for 3/24, meaning someone's going to get an ad 3 times in 24 hours. Okay, fine. Can we make that 1/24 in certain markets? That would be a question I would have. Am I using UTM tracking across everything and taking credit for all my work? And also, are my naming conventions consistent across everything? So that could be something that needs to get. The other thing that you got to think about is sometimes you might have vendors who are using UTM codes and they're using some kind of naming convention that doesn't make sense to you. So I've seen that too, where they'll use like they'll use ID numbers, like placement ID numbers or something like that, which probably, map to something on their end, but doesn't make sense to you. And when you're visualizing the data, you want it to look clean and make sense. So I think there's kind of two pieces. One, are we using UTM tracking everywhere that we should? Yes or no. And then two, we want to clean up the naming conventions and make sure that everything's consistent so it gets grouped together and also just like makes sense when you're looking at it, that everything that anybody can look at the data and sort of understand what it means. You can also understand which tactics are performing best and what optimizations can be made. So we'll get into the demo and I'll show you kind of that example and how you can compare media types and vendors and sort of understand what's performing best. Again, just so that way if there's opportunities to make optimizations or shifts, you can do that. And then same with content strategy. I spoke to that a little bit when we were talking about the various pages that might be performing really well and leaning into that. Another example that I've seen is we had a client who had a viral TikTok video. And just to give some context to that, they had a TikTok, normally their TikTok videos get like 2 or 3,000 views, and they had one get 500,000 views. And if you're familiar with TikTok, which I know I am, when you watch the video, there's no way to click out and go to the website. TikTok wants to make sure that you continue doom scrolling within their app so they keep you in there. You can put the URL within the profile, but it's not something that you can't really click out. Anyways, so it's kind of like, how do I measure the effectiveness of my TikTok videos? Or certainly, how do I measure the effectiveness of this extremely viral TikTok video? Well, in this example, we were actually able to tie it all together because the TikTok video was promoting a very specific event, and they had a page on their website that was also associated to that event. So within the website attribution, we were able to filter for the exposure dates of when they were running the TikTok video and the visit dates of when the actual event was, and then find that, and then that page, look at that visit rate, and it was literally like 20 times higher than the visit rate of anything else. So what that was sort of the story that we were able to see there was, okay, people were seeing the video on TikTok, and then they were typing up, XYZ event, coming to their website, finding that page, and then ultimately visiting. So it was great for a few reasons. One, I mean, it's awesome to see, but also just the value of a viral video, does that, actually lead to visitation? And in this case, yes. I think also just the importance of videos, especially on TikTok, because you can't click out, that it does link to some content that's also very specific on your website. So when people are viewing the video and they want to go search, that they can quickly get to the information that you were promoting. I think it also speaks to that was like a really specific call to action on that video. So it made it very easy for people. So obviously sometimes you're going to have videos that are going to be, or just creative in general, that are going to be more awareness, upper funnel. But when there's an opportunity to have a really specific call to action on the ads, we do see really good performance with that. And certainly having pages on your website that also align with that, we do see really strong visit rates with that. Okay. That was my tangent on TikTok. Okay, and then these are other insights. Certainly, is just understanding if your media research and such is demonstrating a true economic impact, including the jobs, taxes, and spending. So not just the visitor spending, but also that indirect and induced spending. Making sure that the results and methodologies that you're utilizing are credible and trusted. I would say also just making sure there's a lot of transparency, that you understand the methodology so that way you can speak to it when you're talking to your stakeholders. And then ensuring that the methodology includes a control group. I think you're going to get a lot of pushback if not, because they are going to say, well, these people were going to visit anyway. Like, you just showed an ad to somebody who was already planning to visit. So having a control group certainly helps you defend against that. And then if international visitation is important, making sure that you can track that as well. So, okay, I want to shift to the demo. But I'm just checking, is there a question? Oh, okay. Does the tracking, there is a couple questions, so I'll pause for a second. Does the tracking work if people are connecting through a VPN? Great question. No, it does not. And so because the VPN is going to be, they'll get filtered out. I would say it works, but they're going to get filtered out. So I know there's like not, but we're not seeing that being like a huge percentage of people. Sure, some people have a VPN, but they're not on a VPN all the time. Like, I don't know about you, like I've used a VPN so I could get access to a sports game when I was out of town and I was out of market. But as soon as the game was over, I was disconnecting from VPN because that your phone doesn't really work very well on VPN. Like it will slow it down, and some apps don't work as expected. So also just keeping in mind that even people who use a VPN aren't necessarily using it all the time. It's like for specific reasons. And then what percentage of the, I'm just reading another question out loud. What percentage of the actual people in the market do you feel like you capture through your geo data? Okay, good question. So I don't know that the percent is as important as the actual raw sample number. You want to make sure that the number that you are collecting is large enough to derive insights off of and statistically representative. And that's more important than the percent is the raw number and ensuring that that number is large enough. So certainly when it comes to economic impact, there could be, and there is some destinations who have lower data volumes, and we just have to wait longer and collect more data before we're able to derive the economic impact to make sure that we do have a statistically significant sample. So another example when talking about this is think about, getting your blood taken. They just need a sample of your blood. You know what I mean? They don't need all your blood to check your iron levels. They need a specific sample. And if that specific sample is representative of all of your blood. Anyways, weird example. I feel like considering I can't see any of you, I'm talking about blood, but I do think that it helps with sort of like thinking about samples and how much you need. Okay, those are the last questions. So I'm gonna dig into the demo. Okay. We already went through the media impact demo, so I just want to show you the website as well. It's actually very similar. Just again, we're looking at what the exposure date is. So that's the time in which somebody came to your website, and then the associated visit date. So then saying these are people who came to your website between July and October and visited the destination between July and January in this particular example. Again, this is impressions for your website. And then the influence visits, as I mentioned, is going to be accounting for that control group. It is also going to account for the fact that it's a sample, meaning, we do have to true up the numbers, and there's quite a bit of methodology that goes behind that. But so this isn't the sample number, if that makes sense. So this is using methodologies to true up to what we're believing is the total influence visits into the market, and then the associated spending that goes along with that. Okay, I was gonna do a little bit into our attribution demo account just so you could see it rather than just the static screenshots that I was showing. So this is a website example. And in this case, I just was filtering for June to July. I like to, whenever I'm going through this with clients, I always like to look at this seasonally because it changes so much seasonally. So I usually am not looking at it for more than a few months at a time, maybe at an overall level. But once I'm starting to dig into the pages, everything changes based on what the season is in terms of where people are going on your website. So anyway, so these are the exposure dates. This is just saying how many people we measured to your website. This is everyone who visited. So this is not using the influence control group. That's only on the economic impact. This is the visit rate. So this is a metric that I like to look at over time to understand if it's going up or down. This is definitely a number that I'm paying close attention to. Then we're also looking at the time that it takes from the time they went to the website and ultimately showed up. And that's being visualized here. You can also see up here, we have this filter for 3 days. What that means is just in the default, if somebody comes to your website and visits the next day in this particular view, we're excluding them. It has to be 3 days later, but it is something that you can shift and change. But just so you know that's what that is. Then we also visualize the various points of interest or regions if you're a state, depending, just so you can kind of understand where people are coming, the people that come to your website. Again, like talking about that TikTok example, would have been so curious to like filter for that particular event page and then sort of see, are we seeing them, where are we seeing them within the city? Reconnect. Okay, then we're going to scroll down to the various sources, and there's also campaign. So in those, when I'm talking about those UTM codes that append to the end of your URL, that's UTM campaign, source, and medium. That's what's getting visualized here. So however you label it is essentially what you're going to see. And in this one, it's pretty clean. Like I was saying, I don't see, we're not seeing kind of that Facebook issue that I see a lot of times. But still, my guess is that in this example, we're not tagging with UTMs everything that we could be. So pretty much everybody I talk to, that's something that we end up being able to really increase the usage of those. Then we can look at performance by page. And again, this is like everyone who comes to this page. This is everyone who then ultimately visits. So you can see it very much shifts in terms of what is the highest visitation, doesn't outmatch exactly with the highest number to the page. And maybe this probably makes sense because you're probably running a ton of media. In this case, driving people to the fall page. Not all of them are going to convert. So this isn't necessarily unexpected, but it is interesting to take a look at. This also can speak to when we're running a campaign. Let's say we're running a 3-month campaign for fall. Are we always sending them just to the fall page? Like somebody's going to see an ad maybe 10, 11, 12 times. I don't know what your frequency would be over the course of the campaign, but do we always only want them going to the fall page? So it's something to consider, like maybe throughout the campaign, is there an opportunity to change creative, change the call to action, or change the ultimate landing page so that they're getting, if they're going to click more than one time, they're not always going to the exact same page. We have seen some results that suggest, and it's probably too early to completely say, but in some cases, we're seeing higher visit rates when we see more of a variance between different pages rather than everything's going to things to do page. But then again, we can also filter for visit rate. And again, everything shifts again. And that's why I like to do this based on different time periods, just because it does change so much. Okay, and then again, as I've kind of talked about this, looking at the origin markets and kind of comparing, okay, what markets have the highest impressions? And this is actually very fun to do between website and media, because your website might not necessarily match the media. So there could be people coming to your website, let's just say from whatever Dallas, but you're not actually running any media in Dallas, and maybe the visitation rate is actually pretty good. So sometimes you can uncover, it's just curious, right, to see how this differs from the media execution you're doing, and maybe it makes sense and you don't change anything. And certainly that's why it's very much a collaborative partnership between the two teams, because you guys know everything about the DMO and you're going to know specific tactics. I'm just trying to like point out things that I see based on what I've seen on other dashboards. But that can be really interesting to just see how that difference is. I see a question really quick. Couple questions. Okay, sorry. In your media attribution, visit means visit to the web page. In your website, no. In both cases, so good question. I probably wasn't clear. In website, this is saying you came to the website and you visited my destination. In media, also, you saw, now in this case, you saw an ad and you visited my destination. So the reason this is valuable is because, first of all, the click-through rate on ads is what, it depends, right? 1%, 0.5%, 0.2%. Also, there's a lot of ads where the goal is not to get them to click through the landing page. Like on a podcast, the goal is for them to listen to the ad, or on a CTV ad, the goal is for them to watch the video, not necessarily click through. So with media, you're just capturing if they saw the ad and then ultimately visited. With website, you're capturing if they landed on your website and then visited. So, is there some overlap between the two? Certainly, because you could have seen an ad, then visited the website, and then visited. So, in this case, like you'd be counted in both places. But the nice thing about a website attribution is it captures the search and social when that's linking to your website, whereas you can't pixel that. Facebook, all social platforms don't allow third-party pixels. I like to joke that they'll let you know if they did a good job, like Facebook will let you know. And good news, Facebook's performance was really good and they served all the right ads. They were able to spend your entire budget. It worked perfect. Just teasing, but just saying that you can't pixel it. But if they're clicking through to your website, if that's the call to action on that ad, then you can still sort of see what the visitation resulted is. So sorry if I wasn't clear. Both website and media attribution is measuring visitation into your market, into your DMO. I might have missed it. How do you carve out a control group? Is it for people who didn't see the media impressions? So we just take organic direct as our control? No, so not exactly. Let me talk about control group for website, and then I'll talk about control group for media, just so we're on the same page, because they are built separately. So website control group are going to be people who did not go to your website, but they look similar to the people that went to your website. And then we're looking at what was their visit rate. So let's take like me. I go to your website and I go to your DMO. Then we're saying, okay, cool. Let's look at people like Laura who didn't go to their website. Did they go to the destination? And then that's essentially what's getting modeled out. With media, same situation, except in this case, it's people who saw an ad. So we're looking at everyone who saw the ad and then visited, and we're saying, okay, create a control group of people who look just like those people, but did not see the ad. What was their visit rate into the market? And then we're pulling that visit rate out to get to the influence number. So yeah, so it's not, so in your question where you say we take organic direct as our control, no, because we're still applying the economic impact to your organic and direct visitation. I mean, they could get modeled out if they, be based on the control group, but that's not, you're still, there's still some economic impact for that, if that makes sense. Okay, yeah, you said got it. From media to web page, I can use UTM link. How do I link from web page to geolocation? Okay, so we do that. So if you remember, I was saying we will pixel your website. So I'll give you a pixel. It gets placed via Google Tag Manager. It's very easy. It takes like 1 minute. What happens is that pixel is placed to trigger on every page on your website. And so we capture the IP address. Sorry, my nose keeps running. The IP address of everyone who's coming to your website. Then we're bridging that to the phones that are also associated with that IP, and then saying, okay, does that phone show up in your destination? So that's how it works. The UTM link, and sorry if I just get on my soapbox about UTMs. UTMs is just a way for us to, on website, break out all the different ways people are getting to your website, if that makes sense. So let's say you're running a campaign with TripAdvisor, with Expedia, you have your social team is running some ads on Facebook, and whoever hosts your website is running your search, let's just say. And you're giving them links saying, I want TripAdvisor going to the fall page, I want Expedia going to the things to do page, and the other two to the home page. You want to use UTM tracking on the end of those URLs. So that way, if somebody sees a TripAdvisor ad, or they see an Expedia ad, or they see a Google search or a Facebook ad, and they click through to your website, that we're capturing that through. And we know that, okay, this website visit was from TripAdvisor. This website visit was from Expedia. This website visit was from social. This website visit was from Google search. So that way, if they do ultimately come into market, we can kind of credit all of that back. Okay, cool. Yay. Um, I lost my train of thought. But so I don't remember where I was at, to be honest. Um, okay. Well, maybe I'll just pause. Are there any, I'll just pause there because I'm not sure that I remember. But this is the attribution dashboard and the type of insights that you can derive from it. Oh, yeah, I didn't get to show you guys this. On media, so website really relies, doesn't rely, but the UTM codes help us get more robust data. It's not reliant, it's just, it helps break everything out. Otherwise, things get captured as organic when they're not really organic. With media, in some ways it's easier because together you and I will create all these pixels and we'll label them exactly how we want them. And we'll send them to the various vendors. We'll send the pixel to TripAdvisor. We'll send the pixel to Expedia, and it will be clearly labeled, spring campaign, display, Expedia. And then so then when people see those ads, we're capturing all of that in a clean way, and then able to then visualize that. So then at the campaign level, we would, and this is something absolutely we can decide, how do we want to label it? We don't want to get too granular, but at the same time, we don't want all the media for the whole year to just be called FY25. So we might throw in like a high level tactic or something like that into the naming convention. But then we will break out all of the vendors that we're running. So whether, like I was mentioning, yeah, Sojourn, DV360 is a large DSP, perhaps you're running ads there. Pandora, Expedia, la la la. And then if you're running multiple different media types on any of those, then we can break that out. And that can be just sort of interesting because depending on how you're breaking out the budget or how the client is suggesting to break out the budget, it just can be curious to see if you get different results in terms of visit rate based on the types of ads and the types of media that you're running. So all of this also gets broken out in a very clean way for media. So, well, I feel like I've talked at you for a long time, so maybe I'll just pause and let you ask any questions or go back to your day.
Laura, I did see one from Jacob. It was back when you were doing the last round of Q&As, and I'm not sure if you answered this or at what point this question was asked. It was following up from one of your other questions, and it said, "Look like you in what way?" I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay. Yes, I
Okay.
totally, that is a good question. Look like you in what way? Yes, in terms of similar. So the question is essentially when I'm saying I'm building a control group that looks like the people that saw an ad or looks like the people that visited your website, they're saying looks like, what do you mean? A similar demographic profile living in similar geographies or same geography, actually, same general geography and similar demographic profile.
And then Justina is asking, what qualities make someone like a website viewer? Is it related to zip code,
Yeah.
data assumptions?
So this is same question essentially, but just saying, yeah, same question. Yeah. So I think we got that one.
And then Bev was asking, should you be able to track via UTMs two different geo areas if you were doing geofencing in two different cities, states, and wanted
Oh,
to
great
know what?
question. Great question. In you should already be able to see that because we're breaking out the origin market, and anything in the dashboard, if you click on it, it filters all the other metrics. So let's just say you were running whatever Expedia in Dallas and Houston and you wanted to see which one performed better, you could just filter for just TripAdvisor and then you would see that broken out. Now, that being said, some people still want to label it separately. So you can label it, but I don't know that you need to. But I do have people that they're like expanding to a new market or something, and they're like, well, we want to label this as that market. So we do.
And then Hugo was asking if this is available for Canadian destinations.
Yes, in fact, we partnered with Destination Canada.
Um, There's a couple more. Uh, Continuing on with Bev's question that you just previously answered, is that impossible with a company named Azira? Not sure.
Impossible. Did you mean impossible? I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not sure about that one. You
but
can,
but I'm just not sure. Bev, did you mean impossible? Can you clarify?
and then, oh, here she goes again. Yes, they advised, couldn't differentiate two cities.
Oh, well, that might be with the type of reporting that they're specifically providing that's different than what we are. So with us, we're getting all of the underlying data and the origin market of where they live, and then we're visualizing that into the dashboard. So that could just be a limitation or something with a particular product that they have. So
And then last one that I'm seeing, this clears up questions I had regarding the attribution tabs. Will you be talking about the POI tabs by chance?
um it within attribution, the share of I'm not sure if you mean so in the attribution tab there's a section for POIs, so that would be, and you're probably familiar because but whatever points of interest we've categorized for you, we will be able to see visitation down to those particular points of interest. So that's in the dashboard, and the examples I was oh, in visitor insights. Oh, well, this is Visitor Insights is a different product than attribution. So Visitor Insights is just everybody who's coming to your location, regardless if they saw an ad or visited your website. So what I'm chatting about is specific to attribution, meaning that they would have needed to eat. Okay, cool. Sorry. Yes, good question. So Bev, we for website attribution, we are partnered with Destination International, and it's based on what your budget is at the DMO level, and it's listed on their website. I think it's like $8,000 to $10,000 a year, I think is the lowest level. Don't remember off the but I can send that over to you, or like I said, I know it is on their website as well. So she's just asking what's the lowest investment level. And the lowest investment level would be partnering just for website, not media. Because usually for some folks that have a smaller budget, they're really mostly just doing search and social. They're not running a lot of media in some of those other type of vendors that can be pixeled. So they don't move forward with media attribution, and they only move forward with website attribution. So that's the most common for smaller budgets. And yeah, that pricing is based on what your budget is, and it's very like it's transparent on the Destination International website. So I can send that over to you. Let's make a note. Cool.
Perfect. That is all the questions I see. I did see that Heather from North Little Rock said that you killed it, and I do agree. You did an amazing job. So we can go ahead and wrap it up, Laura, unless you have anything else you'd like to add.
No, just thanks for joining, and feel free to reach out to me if you want to directly, dig into even more details. We can do it. Oh, another question. Oh, no, I can answer that. So he says, not sure if this is something proprietary, but what happens behind the scene from a tag pixel to understand the visitor has visited a POI? Well, this is honestly kind of like what I had talked about already. So what happens is that the pixel is running, it's capturing the IP address. That IP address is getting bridged to a device ID. So that there's a whole mechanism around that that is probably somewhat proprietary, but essentially filtering out public IP, making sure that that device is also associated with that household IP. So there is a lot of like cleaning that you have to do to make sure that you're not essentially giving credit to devices that aren't associated with that IP. But then once we've made that bridge, then we're using the location data from that device to say, okay, are we seeing a latitude, longitude ping from their GPS inside of a POI? Yes or no? And if we do, then that's kind of how it goes from pixel to POI visit, is from that data, the location data. But the device location from Juice won't be shared with you. Yeah, okay, what I'm saying is not necessarily what I'm saying is that there's various SDKs and various apps that collect location data. And it is what's passed is the latitude and longitude from the GPS of the device within those various apps. And so that's the data that's being passed. So it's not going to necessarily have data. And I think we kind of talked about this. You won't necessarily get location data from every single device. That's why it is a sample. And so we don't see every single person, every single place. What's important is that that sample is large enough, that actual number is large enough and representative of the total. So, but that is how it's done. Got an SDK embedded tool to get, yeah. Yep. Yes.
Perfect. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So thank you so much, Laura, for everything, giving so many insights, and thank you to everyone for being so involved, asking your questions, and engaging in a lot of back and forth. It was awesome. So thank you so much, everyone. I will be sending out the access to the link for the recording of this webinar in the coming days. If you have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. But thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks.